To summarize the year 2020 for the IEA, we'd have to take account of the fact that we were surprised. And in our surprise, we responded to the fact that at the beginning of the year, we expected to start the implementation of the new strategic plan. And then come March, the country, just like other parts of the world, had to be closed down on account of the COVID-19 pandemic. So initially, the thinking was that it was a short 4 weeks or several weeks before resumption would take place, but we realized that that would be a permanent state of features for the year 2020. So most of our activities, dear members, all were conditioned, and the reports that we give you are conditioned by the fact that the year 2020 was just a year of surprise and great uncertainty. But we had to keep activity levels maintained. And you can see that in March, the Institute of Economic Affairs moved most of our activities, engagement with members, and engagement with the various policy audiences that we do interact with, to more virtual spaces. It started as an experiment, but we think it worked fairly well. And we had a total of 35 engagements between March and December of last year, keeping us to an engagement, a virtual webinar, a workshop, or some kind of policy discussion once every 10 days or less. And we're glad that many members of the Institute of Economic Affairs, together with the various publics that we dealt with, and policy engagement audiences, responded quite well, including the fact that we had our first, the IEA's first annual general meeting in its 25 years on a virtual platform. So it was a year of uncertainty. Nevertheless, we responded and kept our focus, emphasizing certain things, implementing a new strategic plan that required us to expand the footprint across the 5 policy areas of our engagement. Secondly, we focused on the COVID-19 pandemic, largely because it was in itself started as a health crisis. It became a public affairs and economic crisis over time. So in the activities and the research that we undertook, the COVID-19 analysis or inclusion of COVID-19 and the implications of the COVID-19 responses by government, by the private sector, and individuals and firms became a central place of the activities that the IEA did. So in total, conscious of the fact that public meetings could not be large, on keeping the office space, we deployed our policy engagement into the national newspapers through opinion articles, in which we presented 7 articles discussing a variety of issues, including the COVID-19 itself. At the IEA, we have blog posts, close to 20 of them, again once every second week, continuing to create the discussion, public education, and expanding the scope of people's understanding of public affairs generally and COVID-19. In addition to that, we had continuing public affairs work in studies and specific reports that were published, including our usual budget work, our work on international trade, discussing topical issues including women traders, the effect of the pandemic on trade and services, trade facilitation and what it means for COVID-19, questions of law and the economy and financing in various arms of government, especially the judiciary. On the other side, trying to understand what pandemic meant for the 2 largest public services in Kenya, principally education and public health. So our work came about wrapped around the fact that the moment was important. And the relevance of this to the Institute of Economic Affairs is that it shows nimbleness in our ability to continue to execute our programs. It shows nimbleness in our engagement with our partners and policy engagement for the issues of the moment. So we took within our grasp issues that were topical, but going ahead with trying to chase our mission, which is to ensure that 1, Kenyans live in a prosperous country, constitutional order is maintained, but at the same time, that prosperity of individuals and firms are secured through effective and feasible policy choices.
My name is John Mutua. I work at the Institute of Economic Affairs as a programs coordinator, and I also head the program on public finance management. So the goal of PFM, which is Public Finance Management, is basically to provide insights on macroeconomy, as well as influence fiscal policy, and then working together with our members, civil society organizations, professional groups, we contribute towards strengthening their demand for accountability, which is key in terms of improving services, in terms of looking at the way public resources are utilized and managed, because this is key towards improved service delivery. Now, we know that in 2020, it was quite a difficult year, not only for the economy, but also for IEA as an organization. And for the program, we had to basically adopt and change some strategy, especially when it came to policy engagement. Whereas in the past, of course, we used to have we had physical meetings, especially for our public forums. In 2020, most of these events were actually held virtually through webinars. So having said that, I would like to share 3 key highlights of 2020 in terms of some achievement. Now, the first one, and actually in relation to just making lemonade out of lemon, is that we did some work through partnership with some organization called Observer Research Foundation, based in India. So we did some work and contributed to a chapter for a publication that they were doing that was looking at Africa's battle with COVID and just basically the roadmap of Africa. Now, the PFM program contributed a chapter on economic response to COVID. Then secondly, again, something related to COVID is that we were chosen among 6 think tanks based in Africa, Asia, and South America to be part of a group and partner with Overseas Development Initiative towards doing some work regarding macroeconomic policy response to COVID. So IEA was chosen. In Africa, there are only 2 institutions, and the other 4 institutions were actually coming from both South America as well as Asia. So this was a good opportunity in terms of just basically getting to learn from the other think tanks, but also as a fundraising initiative. The second achievement, and again in relation to just the aspect of generating insights and evidence, is that we did some work looking at a controversial but yet a noble objective or project in Kenya. So there's this project on leasing of medical equipment in Kenya, which is quite noble and a new project in terms of public-private partnership in the social sector. Most of the public-private partnerships are evident in the infrastructure sector, but there are very few in the social sector. So what the IEA did was basically to assess the value for money on this project. It's actually called Managed Equipment Services, and so we're able to generate some evidence on the same, a report, and we use this report to basically engage. And we had quite a bit of media coverage and engagement on the results. And some of the key things that we are advocating is the need for the entire project to be redesigned and reconfigured just before it lapses in 2022. Because so far from the findings of our analysis of the Auditor General's report regarding this project is that there are certain hiccups or challenges with regard to its implementation. There are equipments that have not been delivered to a couple of counties, and there are cases where those equipments have been delivered but they are not in use for various reasons. And so we flagged out these reasons. And also, one thing to note is that actually from our analysis, we were invited by the Health Committee of the National Assembly. And before then, we had actually shared our findings with the Health Committee of the Senate. And we shared and noted that there is need, based on some evaluation, for the entire project to be reconfigured. The other thing that we noted is obviously the need for some special audits to be undertaken on this project. And what we can already see towards the end of 2020 is that the Auditor General had mentioned that they were going to undertake some special audits on the same. The final achievement, the use of new tools. Increasingly, the Institute of Economic Affairs and the program, the Public Finance Management Program, is using new tools to generate evidence and use the same for advocacy and policy engagement. Now, again, in relation to the issue of COVID, we partnered with a think tank based in the United States, the Urban Institute, and this partnership was actually brought together through a project that we are working on through the support of the Hewlett Foundation, and the project is basically looking at issues of strengthening devolved institution and decentralization process, and in particular the aspect of division of revenue between the two levels of government. So in relation to COVID, we had to agree and basically do some work, and the work that we did is using composite indices. We put data together and use that information to basically assess the capacity of all the 47 county governments to respond to COVID against the different population risks that they were facing. And so in this process, we were able to generate some research and a report, and use that again for engagement. So we had a webinar, we launched that report, and based on that and the findings and recommendations of that report, we were actually invited by different media houses just to share the findings. And what you can notice that through the research work, we were able to highlight some of the challenges that counties were facing. For instance, I remember the issue of, we noted that Siaya had a major challenge in terms of its infrastructure, in terms of the number of beds, ICU beds, medical personnel and the like. And given the COVID cases they were facing, they were not able to address those. So we flagged that, and it was captured in some of the leading newspapers, and even the president mentioned that. Those are some of the key highlights of the Public Finance Management Program, and we believe that the momentum that we've created in 2020 will be able to carry the same for 2021. Thank you.
My name is Jacqueline Kagume, and I work as a program officer under the Constitution, Law and Economy Program. The goal of the CLE program is to monitor the performance of key institutions created by Kenya's Constitution, to check for adherence to minimum constitutional thresholds, and also to apply legal and economic analysis to various policy choices. In line with this goal, we have two main objectives. The first being to open up the processes of these institutions to public scrutiny and enhance the capacity of various stakeholders to engage with the institutions. Some of our target institutions include the judiciary, parliament, the Office of the Auditor General, and other independent offices. In the year 2020, we completed a project supported by USAID's Ahadi program on strengthening the capacity of county oversight committees to interpret the Auditor General's reports and implement the recommendations. The project also involved strengthening CSO's understanding and advocacy on the OAG report findings. Some of the reported outcomes by the main target groups was increased knowledge and skills for interpretation and utilization of their financial audit reports. Our second program objective is to check for alignment of various laws and policies to the Constitution and national development goals. In line with this objective, we implemented a project on civic engagement for open contracting, which aimed at generating knowledge on public procurement and related fraud, as well as increasing public discourse on open contracting. The main outputs from the project included an analysis of public procurement violations and highlights from the OAG reports, and an analytical report on the system and practice of public procurement in Kenya. Then for advocacy and policy engagement, we held various webinars in the course of the year, and this included a pre- and post-budget forum on funding for the judiciary to discuss the resourcing of the institution and its implications for administration of justice. Then, following the declaration of the COVID-19 emergency, we also held a forum to discuss the legislative and oversight measures implemented to mitigate the crisis, and held a subsequent discussion on emergency expenditures and emerging corruption risks. Lastly, we held a forum to discuss the 2020 Index of Economic Freedom, focusing on the results of the performance of countries within the East African community. For the year 2020, the program had 7 major outputs, including research reports, analysis of the Auditor General's reports, a position paper on Kenya's national policing budget, land sector budget analysis, and chapter contributions to various institutional reports. In conclusion, the CLE program is grateful to various development partners and organizations who supported our work in the year 2020. We received support from USAID's Rcp Program, HIVOS, the Independent Medical Legal Unit, and the Kenya Land Alliance. We thank them for the partnership and look forward to increased meaningful collaboration in the years to come. Thank you.
My name is Winnie Ogejo, and I work at the Institute of Economic Affairs under the Futures and Foresight Program. So the program seeks to apply futures methodologies and scenario building techniques to generate evidence. And once the evidence is generated, we use it to guide policy, public policy discourses, and also try to create an understanding of the non-obvious by monitoring trends, exploring future possibilities, and shaping strategies in general shifts within the society. So in terms of what the program, the activities the program carried out last year, we focused on 3 areas. We had research, we had public forums which changed because of COVID to webinars, and then of course we had blogs. So in terms of research, we carried out a research on education financing, and this we did in partnership with the Higher Education Loans Board. So this research was just trying to look at the efficacy of the Higher Education Loans Board. Is it really achieving its mandate in terms of education financing? And if so, are there challenges they're experiencing? And in terms of resource mobilization, how are they doing with that? And is it sustainable? So what are some of the sustainability strategies that they have in place? And in terms of webinars, the program managed to carry out 11 webinars. And these 11 webinars focused on different sectors. So we focused on health, we focused on the education sector, we focused on the manufacturing sector, and we focused on the real estate. All these were trying to bring an understanding on what COVID-19 has done to these different sectors. What was the impact of COVID-19 on these very different sectors? Why? Because COVID-19 began as a health issue, but in no time it had trickled down to all sectors and had impacted them in different ways. So we just wanted to understand what was this impact COVID-19 had on these sectors. And out of this, we really focused on the education sector, seeing that it was largely impacted. We saw the closure of schools for about 9 months in Kenya and longer in different parts of the world. So having looked at the impact of COVID-19 on the education sector in Kenya, we took the conversation globally and we invited teachers from different countries across the globe, 8 countries to be precise, just to try to explain to us how COVID-19 had impacted the various education sectors in their various countries. And out of that global conversation that we had with these teachers, and it backed an opportunity and platform for teachers to have conversations on issues of education and give it a global perspective. And we are continuing with that work together with the teachers. And in terms of blogs, we wrote several blogs, and one of the blogs that we wrote together with the communications team on the economics of reopening schools in Kenya was captured by one other global think tank, that is the Southern Voice. this blog was just trying to look at what needs to be done even as we are recovering from COVID-19 and having our children going back to school. There were certain structures that were put in place by the government to ensure that we slowed down the spread of the virus. So having looked at that, the blog was just trying to bring to an understanding the cost implication and any other implications that we would have to consider even as we were considering reopening schools and having our learners go back to school. So in terms of activities that we carried out for the year 2020, that was it for the program, and those were some that actually really stood out within the program. So thank you so much for your time.
My name is Stephen Jairo. I work at the Institute of Economic Affairs as a program officer under the Economic Regulation and Competition Policy Program. I will take us through the key highlights for the year 2013, but before I do so, I just want to give us a quick rundown on what the goal and objectives of the program are, as well as the strategic interventions that we undertake to ensure that the goals and objectives of the program, thereby helping us to make the mission and vision of the IEA. So firstly, what is the goal of the Rcp program? The program is actually meant to promote and undertake efficient, so to speak, regulatory approaches and coordination that helps to ensure that the burden of the economy and businesses are actually scaled down for the economic welfare of individuals and citizens. And to do so, we have various strategic interventions, which include but are not limited to public education, which we take the form of webinars, and also policy discourse in various areas under the program. Now, within the year, what we'll be able to do in terms of the areas of research, I'll take you through three areas of research, public forums, as well as blog posts. So to start with, I'll give us a rundown of the research areas that we were able to undertake within the year. The first was on the telecommunications sector, in which we were trying to look at the rundown of liberalization within the telecom sector since liberalization in the 1980s up to the year 2020. And some of the key areas that this study was looking at was the regulatory environment and coming now to what the future holds for the area of telecoms in the country. The other area in which we did undertake research was in terms of looking at the gap analysis for the youth of this country. And this gap analysis was undertaken in key areas such as employment, poverty, and the economic challenges, as well as poor leadership. As a program, we look at the areas of unemployment as it is key, and one of the key areas that the program looks at. So those are the two researches that we managed to do within the year, and the outputs are there on the website. You can interact with them actually as possible. Then I'll now move to the areas of forums, public forums. With the onset of the COVID pandemic last year, we shifted our forums from actually being physical to virtual. So we were having webinars during the year. Some of the webinars that I would like to just to highlight include one on the opportunities in the Big Four, focusing on the agricultural sector. The other one, of course, which is also closely linked with the area with the challenge that was posed by COVID, was on the food security within the realm of the challenges brought about by the COVID pandemic. Remember, during the pandemic, there were lockdowns, which meant that food items were not reaching the intended audiences. So we need to understand what that meant for the Kenyan populace. And then just want to highlight as a last webinar was an important one, because with the COVID challenge we had the issues of vaccines that were now coming to help us stem the adverse effects of COVID-19. So we held a webinar on the ethics of productions of vaccines, and you can interact with that particular webinar on our website. Now, I'll move to the last part of the outputs that we held for the year, and that has to be the blog posts that we actually wrote, the blogs that we wrote, and out of the three I just mentioned one, again, has to be pegged on the pandemic. So there's a blog that we had on the pandemic challenges for the informal sector workers in Kenya. As you can recall clearly, we had very many persons and very many workers losing out on their jobs. And this actually brought out a very negative effect on people's livelihood, their dependents, their friends, families, and even workmates. So these are some of the key highlights that I can mention that the program took for the year 2020. The outputs are there for all of us to see. So I welcome you all to indulge in them on our various social media platforms and our website. Thank you.
Hello everyone. My name is Maureen Barasa and I work under the special program. Our program goal is to elevate public debate through improving the public understanding of economics and public affairs. I'm going to take you through our major highlights for 2020. Our first highlight for 2020 was our collaboration with the Observer Research Foundation on a publication named The Day After Tomorrow, Africa's Battle with COVID-19 and the Road Ahead. The publication had 3 sections: risk, response, and resilience. We managed to do the write-up on the resilience section. Under the resilience section, we did the build to last. African economies must use the pandemic to build back better. Under this, we did the structural transformation and the state. And we focused on the reliance of the population on basic and subsistence agriculture. How was this impacted during the COVID-19? All this is found in the publication. Then we managed to do the social security frameworks decoupled with employment, and we managed to focus on social protection mechanisms, that is how the government responded to COVID-19 pandemic by enlarging support to households. This was done in Kenya, for instance, through mobile money transfers to the low-income households. Then we looked at the green imperatives, the need for green investment for a resilient future, and we looked at the investment on the green sector and the taxes that were imposed on the green sectors. How will this delay the momentum towards achievement of a green economy? Next, we looked at the human capital, specifically education, and the movement from physical learning to online or printed material. That all this digital transformation, is it going to last? And how did it happen during the COVID-19 pandemic? Next, we looked at thinking about debt sustainability. We all know how the African governments have been involved in debt from the first world countries, and the African countries might risk defaults on debts due to reduction in exports and depleted foreign reserves. Next, we looked at the supply chain resilience. Due to restriction in travel and movement, the supply chain was restricted, and due to this, the pharmaceutical products and medical equipment that was supposed to be used during the COVID-19 pandemic, there was restricted movements, and African governments had to become innovative in making things such as masks and the protective wear that the doctors could use during the COVID-19 pandemic. Lastly, it was the strengthening the banking and financial system. How did African governments respond to this? This was through digital payment ecosystem, central bank reduction rate, and loan restructuring. Finally, we looked at the COVID-19 numbers. and we were trying to look whether Kenya had a mandate effect like many other countries. We looked at the trend in the cases, the fatalities, and the recoveries, and our conclusion was that Kenya did not have a mandate effect. That basically is the highlight for the special program for 2020. Thank you.